Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Stone, the Marketing and Communications Manager at Downtown Cleveland Alliance. And I'd like to thank you for joining Downtown Cleveland Alliance for the Downtown Now webinar series in partnership with Cleveland Magazine. After the panel discussion, we will have a Q&A session. Throughout the webinar, you are welcome to submit your questions using the Q&A button on the menu bar. This way, we'll have questions queued up and ready to go to start the Q&A. Also, feel free to utilize the chat box, and we will do our best to address your comments throughout the broadcast. I will now turn it over to our Executive Vice President for Business Development, Michael Deemer.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. I'd like to say a few words about Downtown Cleveland Alliance for those of you who may not be familiar with us. We are the only nonprofit organization that's dedicated exclusively to making downtown Cleveland the region's most compelling place to live, work, play, and visit. We are a place-based development organization that represents property owners, residents, businesses, as well as civic partners in downtown. Over the last 15 years, we've concentrated on building a clean, safe, welcoming, and pedestrian-friendly place that attracts additional investment. A place where residents and workers can walk to meet their daily needs, and where local retailers and restaurateurs animate our streets, and where people are proud to build a life for themselves and their family. We can't do this work without the generous support of individuals, businesses, corporate partners, and foundations. In response to an outpouring of support and request for ways to help, Downtown Cleveland Alliance has launched the Unite Cle Fund. Donations to this fund support small downtown businesses, aid our Voices of Cle public mural program, expand our Seeds workforce readiness program, which provides jobs and job training to people who are homeless. And it helps sustain our Downtown Cleveland Homeless Fund, which helps connect individuals who are homeless with shelter and needed services. As Jonathan mentioned, we launched the Downtown Now webinar series a few months ago now. And I'd like to thank Cleveland Magazine and Community Leader, our media sponsors, for the project. Since 2018, the Downtown Now insert in Cleveland Magazine has served to highlight the progress of downtown Cleveland, and we've used the webinar to chronicle a rapidly changing environment and the response of downtown Cleveland stakeholders to it. Today, we're going to talk about voting and the US Census. We need strong voter registration, voter turnout, and a strong census response from our downtown residents to ensure that downtown continues to have a strong voice at City Hall, at the State House, and in Congress. In a year in which we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment through which women won the right to vote, and we're holding a presidential election in the midst of a pandemic, unlike any that we've seen in over 100 years, the importance of voting feels like it's taking on even more added weight. We have a lot to talk about: registration, voting by mail, early voting in person on election day, poll working, as well as completing the census. And we truly do have the ideal panel today to talk about these issues with. We're joined by Devontae Dickey, Advocacy and Engagement Coordinator with Cleveland Votes, Tony Perlotti, Director of the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections, and Zach Reed, Minority Affairs Coordinator with the Ohio Secretary of State's Office. Devontae, Tony, Zach, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I thought maybe we'd begin by letting our audience know a little bit about who each of your organizations are and how they fit into the administration of elections in Ohio. And Tony, maybe I'll begin with you, since elections are largely administered at the county basis, and you're leading the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections through this challenging time.
Sure. So Ohio has 88 counties, and the Secretary of State's office is the chief elections official who oversees all of that. But each of those 88 counties are the ones that actually execute what the game plan is going to be for that specific county. So as a director of the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections, I have oversight over our polling locations, poll worker recruitment for our area, the layout and of our ballot, testing of equipment, everything you see on election day, the training of poll workers, all that comes at our local level here. And my staff, we're responsible for really executing the election, taking the rules given down to us and figuring out how do we make that work in our county, which just so happens to be have the most registered voters in the state. So a challenging task, but one that kind of keeps the juices flowing and make you come back and figure out how do you get through the next obstacle in front of you.
Zach, you're here today representing, as Tony alluded to, the chief elections officer of the state of Ohio. Tell us a little bit about how what role the Ohio Secretary of State plays in administering elections in Ohio.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you and Jonathan and Joe Marinucci and your whole team down at the Alliance. I mean, you guys do a fantastic job. The way you enumerated all the fantastic things you're doing, from helping the homeless to helping businesses to helping residents. You can't have a strong downtown unless you have a fantastic organization like you guys to help coordinate those, the residents and the business and all the other ingredients to make up a strong downtown. So first of all, I want to thank you guys for what you continue to do day in and day out. And thanks you once again for allowing me to be on here representing Secretary of State, Mr. Frank LaRose. Well, basically, Tony put it perfectly. I mean, we look at the Secretary as being the overall person that runs the day-to-day operations for Board of Elections. But in reason, I mean, the way it works is every county board runs their own elections, and we just oversee it. And Tony and his gang does a fantastic job down there at the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. And what we're in the process of doing now is we are trying to assist the Board of Elections in whatever they need around the state of Ohio. We got money from the Washington, and instead of, like the Secretary says all the time, instead of him hoarding the money in Columbus, he sent it out to the Board of Elections to say, what do you need? Is it equipment? Is it PPEs? Whatever you need, you get that money, you spend that money, because we want to make sure that we not only have a fair election, but we want the election to be safe at the same time. Also, we're in the midst of trying to get poll workers. I know we're going to talk about that later on. We've got 4,000 polling locations throughout the state of Ohio. We need 35,000 poll workers. And if we don't get those poll workers, we're going to have to close down some polls. Or if we don't get them, they're going to be long lines. You saw what happened in Wisconsin. You saw what happened in Georgia. We do not want that here in Ohio. So we're assisting the Board of Elections around the state of Ohio and what they may need. And as the Secretary of State, Frank LaRose's Minority Affairs Coordinator, my job is to travel the state of Ohio to help as it relates to businesses, and now all hands on deck as it relates to elections.
Well, before I ask Devontae to tell us a little bit about Cleveland Votes, I'd like to circle back to you, Tony, and maybe Devontae, you and Zach could comment on it as well. But one of the things that may not be widely known in Ohio is how there's sort of bipartisanship built into how elections are administered at the county level. And in a presidential year, in times when there may be closely contested elections, I think understanding that bipartisan makeup is important to giving people confidence in the system.
Sure. So that bipartisanship starts at the top. A Board of Election has 4 appointed board members, and those board members ultimately are appointed by the Secretary of State's office. But they need to be 2 of them are members, or 2 members each are from the major political parties. So the local political parties put forward who they want as their who they would recommend as board members, and the Secretary of State reviews that and agrees or disagrees with it. So right there at that, you have 4 people, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. Then it goes down to our leadership team, which is director, deputy director. We don't report to each other. We're equals. Kind of we go with the concept of first among equals being the director, but one is a Democrat, one's a Republican. So you have all these people in their thought processes having bipartisanship. Then as we go throughout the organization, we try to maintain that, having bipartisanship in all the different departments, any area in which an individual has to touch a ballot, such as scanning absentee ballots, proofing the ballot, those types of areas have to be done by a bipartisan team. So even when we hire temporary employees, because while we have a permanent staff of probably about 95, because We do work more than 2 days a year, contrary to what some people think. But there is obviously a cyclical nature to the job too. And so when we bring in those temporary employees, we're doing the same thing, bringing bipartisan teams in, trying to maintain that in all of our operations.
And let me just say, from the Secretary of State standpoint, Secretary LaRose believes in diversity overall. I'm a Democrat working for a Republican, but more so, you just heard me talk about poll workers. We just launched a program called Styling for Democracy, Vote Now. And we literally, Secretary of State LaRose just went Monday into Columbus. We're literally going into the inner city to recruit poll workers from barbershops, beauty salons, barber colleges, cosmetology schools, because he has always said that he wants to make sure that when you walk into that polling place, you see somebody that looks like you. And therefore, he's saying we just can't rely on sending out messages about poll workers. Let's go recruit them personally. So he put together an initiative that's called Styling for Democracy. We're actually trying to recruit poll workers from barbershops and salons throughout the state of Ohio. And anybody who wants to contact me, I'll put my information into the chat box, because we're looking for these poll workers. We're looking for barbershops and beauty salons that would love to partner up with us to be able to achieve that bipartisanship that Tony just talked about.
No, thanks for sharing that. And I think that's really that kind of initiative and that kind of outreach, I think, is a great segue to turning to Devontae to tell us a little bit about Cleveland Votes and some of the things you're working on as an organization. And Devontae, maybe you could lead us up sort of the first issue that we want to address in the election cycle is voter registration in particular, and maybe start leading us into that piece of the conversation.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, dittoing Anthony and Zach's comments, thank you so much for having me on behalf of Cleveland Votes. For those who are maybe unfamiliar with Cleveland Votes, we are a nonpartisan democracy building and mobilization initiative. Emphasis on nonpartisanship. I do want to emphasize that because oftentimes, especially during this time, people love to ask, why should I vote? Why does my vote matter? And the significance of what we do is unpacking that. It is us saying, okay, let's talk about why is it that you don't vote? And getting people to see themselves, as Zach mentioned, seeing themselves in the voting process, seeing themselves in the civic engagement realm. Cleveland Votes, we do about 3 to 4 different things. We are a funder. We provide many grants to nonprofits and organizations throughout the city to conduct voter registration efforts, census efforts as well. We are also an educator and a trainer. We always provide an annual training to 501c3s that must comply to be nonpartisan, in teaching them the ways of how they can practice nonpartisanship. Especially during this time. We are a convener. We love to convene, especially with the Board of Elections, for something called National Voter Registration Day, which we can delve into at any point. And then lastly, we always provide consultation. We love to work with partners, residents, community organizations, CDCs, and encourage them, guide them through the process of how to easily embed voter registration efforts, census efforts into their existing programs. But circling back, Michael, to your question about what are some of the things that Cleveland Votes are doing. First and foremost, we just actually released our Commit to Click campaign, which is our effort to not only provide resources to local organizations, but also supporting them in the process to conduct voter registration programs. What does it look like to do yard signage, trivia nights, virtual summits, car washes even, as well as a plethora of other programs, the most prominent one being our drive-through. What does it look like to do a socially distanced drive-through at an empty parking lot that allows people to come update their voter registration, come complete their vote by mail application, and then we will deliver it personally to the Board of Elections.
Excellent. And again, that's I know the first thing that everybody's focused on right now is making sure that we're getting everybody registered, and that's the first deadline that comes up. So
absolutely.
tell us what is the voter registration deadline for
Oh,
everybody?
absolutely. Yes. So the voter registration deadline is October 5th. We are highly encouraging people to do that now. As we hear all the time, it's the flatten the curve. So the flatten the curve analogy can be applied to the voter registration deadline as well. So first and foremost, October 5th is the deadline. Complete your voter registration, as well as complete your vote by mail application too.
And Zach,
Of which on that point, Michael,
yeah,
on that point, Secretary of State LaRose has sent out, some may have already received it. If they have not, they will receive it soon. All 7.7 million registered voters in the state of Ohio will receive an absentee ballot application. And we are encouraging them, Tony, we're encouraging them to fill that application out and send it back to the Board of Elections. We know it would mean a lot for Tony and his team to get a lot of early votes in, but I mean, we don't know what's going to happen on November the 3rd.
Absolutely.
I know we're not going to have another shutdown no matter what, but we may be at a point where the pandemic virus gets even worse and people just will not feel safe to go out of their house. So we're encouraging people to be able to register to vote, get that absentee ballot application, fill it out, send it into the Board of Elections, and then you got 28 days to vote from the comfort of your own home.
and that request for an absentee ballot or a vote by mail ballot, which it's probably worth clarifying. And Zach, maybe this is one you could clarify as well. There are terms that get used interchangeably out there. Absentee voting, no fault absentee voting, vote by mail. We've had this process in place for a while in Ohio, correct?
20 years. Absolutely. Ohioans have been able for over 20 years be able to vote by mail, vote early. And thanks to Secretary LaRose and the General Assembly, we kept intact that there are 3 ways you're going to be able to vote. One, you're going to be able to vote by mail. That's why we're encouraging people to fill out that absentee ballot application they're going to receive from Secretary LaRose, fill it out, send it in to Tony and his team, and they will send out your ballot starting, I think, Tony, on October the 6th, people will start to receive their ballot. You can vote in person starting October the 6th down at the Board of Elections. Tony and his team are ready to take on that challenge of having a number of people. We have saved souls to the polls. We know that there are a lot of churches that like to organize individuals. I know Devontae and his team like to organize and come down on a Sunday. So we have 2 Sundays that you will be able to come down and vote in person. And then you can vote actually on November the 3rd on election day itself. So we've got 3 ways to be able to vote in the state of Ohio. And we're hoping that everybody that gets that absentee ballot, if they don't take the advantage of sending in their absentee ballot application, they either go vote at the Board of Elections or vote in person. Our big thing is we just need you to go vote.
And Zach, may I just quickly interject and emphasize what you just mentioned regarding the absentee application that every registered voter received. An emphasis on registered voter. Like, there are people who, of course, who are not registered. There's a very high chance they will not receive one because they are not registered. So making sure that that pool of people throughout our city and our county and our state, more importantly, go and in fact register to vote.
And I know there's a lot of ways to register. So before we dig more deeply into voting by mail and early voting, what are some of the ways that people can make sure that they're registered to vote, and if they're not, get themselves registered? And Tony, maybe I'll give that question
Sure.
to you.
So the one option is for an individual to go ahead and fill out a paper registration card and get that over to our office. That they can get that from our website, 443vote.us. They can fill out a PDF, print it out, get it to us. That way, though, they are at libraries, city halls. So there's different areas to get those cards. But there is what I consider to be a more convenient way to do it. If you have access to a computer and you can go ahead and you can register online. Now, when you register online, there's a couple things that you need to have available before you engage in that process. And that's one, You do have to have either a driver's license or state ID because you're going to have to input that onto the screen. But basically, you're putting your name, your address, your either driver's license number or state ID, the last four of your social security number, date of birth, and you're submitting that in. There is a difference between the paper and the electronic, where electronically you do have to have both the last four of your social security number and either the license number or the state ID, where on a paper card, you only need either or. But also a difference is the online system, you have to have that identification that you get from the BMV because it cross-references with the BMV, and that's how we get your signature, to have a signature on file at the Board of Elections. If you do a paper system, the paper card, you do sign that card. It's important you sign that card because we need that, because that then will be your signature of record. Something that individuals need to understand with voter registration is many people think that all government entities were just one big happy family and we all communicate with each other and share information. And while we are a big happy family, we are separate, and our systems don't talk to each other. So while there are people who do need to register, I think a bigger initiative that needs to happen is that people need to update their registration. There definitely is a transient population, whether you live in a rental property, in an apartment, and you're moving around, temporary housing, we need to have your current address on record with us. So it's updating your registration. You update it through those same two mechanisms, paper card, electronically, and that's key because that's what we need to have happen. So not only do you have to be registered, you have to be registered at where you live, and that needs to be completed by October 5th.
And on that point, we have what we call registration reset. Unlike any other Secretary of State, what we've done, what Secretary LaRosa's done, because by law, and they think it's just the state of Ohio, but it's across the nation, states have to have an updated maintenance. They have to maintain an accurate voting roll for their state. So by law, if someone has not participated or contacted their Board of Elections within a 6-year period of time, haven't voted or anything along that line, by law, what they call in the neighborhoods purging, we call it voter maintenance, they're going to be removed. Now, no one's going to be removed from this November 3rd election, but sometime in December, they are going to be removed. So what we have done under the leadership of Secretary LaRose, we've already put up on our website, and you can go to ohiosos.gov, and you can see whether or not your name is actually on that list. But more so, you can download that list because it's done by county, city, streets, and you can look on there and say, hey, you know, I know Zach Reed. He's on this list. If he doesn't vote this November, he's going to be taken off the list. He's going to be taken off the voting roll. And that's not something we want to do. So we're encouraging people to participate in registration reset so that no individual will be taken off of the voting rolls come November the 3rd. But once again, I want to reemphasize, no one is going to be taken out for November 3rd. So going back to the fact that Devontae said, everyone that is a registered voter right now will receive an absentee ballot application. So if you think you're registered and within the next week, a week from the day, you haven't received that absentee ballot application, then you need to contact the Board of Elections because something is wrong, because we're going to send it to all all registered voters. So that's one thing that I want to emphasize, that you got to contact the Board of Elections. You got to make some way of voting, but in some way before November the 3rd, you got to interact with the Board of Elections.
And lastly, another resource I'm going to suggest, going based off Zach's comments, is ohvotes.org. It allows you to not only check your voter registration, which is what we're emphasizing right now, especially if you are in any way, shape, or form confused, or you think that your voter registration is outdated, double check it, triple check it multiple times. So check out ohvotes.org, and then you're also able to track more so the mailing of your vote by mail application to the Board of Elections as well.
No, I think that's another great resource. Thanks for mentioning that, Devontae. And now that we're we've, I think, covered the bases with regard to registration. I kind of want to pivot to what we started to talk about and what I know is a big topic of interest and discussion in Ohio and nationally, and that's vote by mail. And Tony, I wondered if you could share with us a little bit, what the board's message is to the voters of Cuyahoga County with regard to getting the application that the Secretary of State has mailed out back to the board in terms of timing, when to get the application in, when to get the actual ballot mailed back in.
Sure. So, and this is the piggyback on a little bit of what was said by the other panelists is that the vote by mail really is something that I prefer that method personally at all times, but in this pandemic environment is one of the things that is probably more sure than the others, because we don't know what November 3rd is going to look like from a pandemic standpoint, but also weather or whatever else is going on in Cleveland. So the vote by mail, not that it's weather proof, but definitely there's different and pandemic proof, but there's different things that you can do to help ease that process for you. And one of those is that you can take advantage of that process now. In Ohio, it is a two-step process. Step one being the application, and then step two is getting your ballot and voting it and returning that process. Prior to the Secretary of State sending out his application, which we're excited that he's doing that, we look forward to that. In Cuyahoga County, we had already had 140,000 applications in, which is unheard of. When you go back 4 years and compare, you're looking at 2,000-3,000, and we're compared to 140,000. So people are, I think, hearing this message of do it now, don't wait. It's going to help you get through this pandemic voting environment. With the Secretary of State's application, I know mine came in my mailbox on Monday, as well as a lot of my coworkers. So it really is hitting mailboxes this point in time. We're probably going to we're going to see that exact same number and then some. The beauty of voting by mail is that you can start that process now. It's not too early. It's very simple. It's name, address, date of birth, form of ID, and your signature. If you have the Secretary of State's application, he sent it out with a self-addressed envelope. You do have to put a stamp on it, but it is already addressed to our offices. You fill that out, throw it in the mail, we get it. Or for those of you living downtown, working downtown, our offices are at the corner of East 30th and Euclid, 2925 Euclid. We have a big ballot box, secure ballot box in our back parking lot where anyone can drive through 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, put that application in our box. We are starting to process those now, and because it takes time to do that, we manually review every one of those applications to ensure that the information is correct. If it's not correct, we send you a letter and a new application letting you know that. We also will try to call you on the phone and see if we can't cure that defect over the phone. But getting your application in now allows us to work through this massive amount of volume that we anticipate will continue to come. October 6th, the first day of where an absentee opens, that's the first day we can have ballots in the mail. And so what we want to do is we want to maximize that first mailing and have it be as large as possible. And we easily think that we will have 200,000 plus to mail. Now, the vendor needs time to print those. So again, it's important. The earlier we have the data, we can provide it to that vendor. And while we may not be able to mail all of them on day one, our goal is by that Friday to have that big, massive first push out into the mail system. So you have that, again, to maximize the window of time and give you the most time to go ahead and vote it and get it back to us.
A lot in there. Thanks for that overview, Tony. And one of the things that you was in there is talking a little bit about postage. And one of the issues will be, as you mentioned with the mailing that came out, you need to put a stamp on to send the application in. And I know there's a similar issue when the ballot is mailed out. And I know, Zach, that's something that the Secretary of State is working on. Could you tell us a little bit about that and maybe some ways for our audience to get involved?
All right, and just for legal, because Tony did a fantastic job, because Devontae talked about it. So when you receive your application in the mail, and if your neighbor receives their application in the mail and your church members receive their application in the mail, you can literally take their application down to the Board of Election. So what we're encouraging individuals to do is go talk to your neighbors, go talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your church members, and get them to fill out that application, and then take their application and say, I'm healthy enough, I'm gonna leave the house. Don't worry about a stamp. I'm gonna take it down there for you. Now you can do that with the absentee application. You cannot do that with the ballot. So one of the things Secretary LaRose has proposed is that we've got $3 million in our budget, and Secretary LaRose has proposed to the board, the Board of Controls in Ohio, that on September the 14th, to allow us to spend that $3 million, send that money back to the Board of Elections, all 88 Board of Elections, and say, when you send out the ballot, put a self-addressed envelope in that ballot so that those individuals now don't have to worry about finding a stamp, don't have to worry about going to the ballot box down at Tony's place or any other location. In essence, every blue mailbox in the state of Ohio will become a ballot box. So therefore, we're asking individuals to contact the members of the controlling board in Ohio, persuade them to allow us to use our own money. This isn't General Assembly money, this isn't taxpayer money. This is the money that we're getting from our own budget out of the Secretary of State's office. And Secretary LaRose wants and has always advocated that we should do this anyway. Now we understand that because of the 14th Amendment, that you can't really do, I think it's the 14th Amendment, I'm not a lawyer, so don't quote me to that. But the bottom line is you got to make sure everything's fair. Tony and his board may be able to pay for that postage and send it out, but other boards around the state of Ohio couldn't. That's why we're going to take up the challenge of doing it ourselves if we can get the Board of Controls to allow us to use the money. And then that way, the individual will get their ballot, they'll get a self-addressed envelope, and boom, they'll fill out their ballot, put it into any mailbox in the city, in the state, and then we can go from there.
And again, just to kind of clarify the what's going on here is the Secretary of State needs the approval of the controlling board to release those funds. And I think Jonathan is posting in the chat the information for contacting members of the controlling board to urge them to release those funds to the Secretary of State. Is that right, Zach?
Yeah, because we're an executive branch. We're not allowed to spend money unless the General Assembly of the county or the controlling board says yes. So we're hopeful that the controlling board says yes, because I think that would help a hell of a whole lot, Tony. Don't you think that people won't have to go look for a stamp? I don't even know if young people know where a stamp looks like.
Well, I mean, and that's a valid point. A lot of people, you get your bills online, statements online, and all those things. And what we don't want to have either is some confusion where in the spring, the first half of the voting, you had to pay for your return postage. And in the second half, when it was extended, the postage was paid. And now, people need to know what's going on. So a lot of them are going to assume, because that's the first time they voted by mail, that the postage was paid. It just happens again this November. And we don't want them putting a ballot in the mail without that postage on there. So anything to expand the franchise, that's what, regardless of party, that's what all election officials want to see happen.
And Tony and Zach, I appreciate you talking about essentially what you're emphasizing is the novelty. Like it's such a novel voting experience for all of us, especially during this time, whether it's having to vote by mail for the first time. We're all used to seeing ourselves or our parents wake up every morning or, every morning of the election, getting dressed to go and vote. But the two things I do want to talk about related to the nuances of this process is first the signature that you touched on, Tony, like making sure that people sign these documents in the ways that they sign regular documents, because you do not want your signature for your voter registration to look different on your vote by mail, because then that's going to cause even more confusion for Tony and his team. And then secondly, you're also, once again, can check out ohvotes.org as the same resource. And within this platform, you can track your vote by mail ballot from the Board of Elections to your house and then back to the Board of Elections.
Those are both terrific resources. Thank you, Devontae, for mentioning those. And before we move off of vote by mail, Devontae, I guess I'd ask you in particular, are there things related to vote by mail that we've not yet talked about that you think need to be addressed?
As of right now, the vote by mail, I will just emphasize doing it now, doing it early. I think Tony did a great job explaining the process. Yeah, so that would be my ask to the audience to do it now.
Michael, let me just say this.
Please.
Contrary to what you might hear nationally, I want to repeat, Ohio has been doing this for 20 years. We kind of know what we're doing. So it's going to be safe, it's going to be fair, and you don't have to worry about fraud, cheating, or anything like that from our standpoint. Tony and his team and the other 88 county boards of election, they know what the hell they're doing. And we're just going to continue to emphasize, please get that application filled out. Please send it back to the Board of Election, and please vote by mail, because we do not know what's going to happen on November the 3rd.
And Michael, I'd like to just bust one myth. We hear a lot of times is that, well, the vote by mail ballot only counts if it's a close race. Complete lie, not true. In fact, we're allowed to, prior to election day, start to process those ballots, actually scan them in high-speed scanners that are certified equipment, not connected to the internet, and also not connected to the tabulator. It's not until polls close on 7:30 that we can tabulate those results that we've been working on for weeks. But when people see that first set of results at 7:45, when we post something, that's the absentee vote. And so that's a big number, and it's a high percentage. And so they do count. And in fact, you see them first, so that's important for people to know that.
No, that was going to be my next question. So thanks for spelling that out. And again, just to make sure that folks understand the terminology, Tony, when you say that the absentee vote shows up first, that's the vote by mail count, right?
Yes, exactly. So, so what we try to do is we try to have as much as that scanned in as possible, so we can go ahead and report that at 7:45. It was a little bit different in the spring because we got so many ballots back late, like on election day, that it took longer to do. So as we keep saying, flatten the curve, do things as quick as you can. That helps us to get as much as we can in, prior to that. Ultimately, we're going to scan them all, and you might see them later on that evening. But yeah, so absentee vote by mail, that is one and the same. It's a safe, secure process, and it's reported first.
And I want to talk about November 3rd and start with you, Tony, because we've got some nuances in downtown Cleveland that I think are important to talk about. One last thing on vote by mail. When do ballots need to be received by the Board of Elections in order to be counted?
It depends. And here's the depends. If you're going to return your ballot to us by mail, it needs to be postmarked November 2nd, the day before, and then received within 10 days after the election. So, and if you do that, you have to look at the mailbox that you're putting your ballot in. Look at that last pickup time. So it's because it has to be picked up so it can be postmarked. If you don't want to do that, if you want to deliver it to us in person, then that is 7:30 p.m. on election day to our office, 2925 Euclid. You cannot take it to your polling location and drop it off there. You have to bring it to our offices. So those postmarked November 2nd, received within 10 days after the election, personally delivered to the Board of Elections office at 2925 Euclid by 7:30 p.m. on election day.
And on election day, I want to talk a little bit about downtown Cleveland and voting. We've got a unique circumstance where Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse is now the polling location for downtown. Tony, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that, who should show up there, and I know it's a little ways off, but in terms of the health concerns and safety concerns, to the extent that we know, what can folks expect on November 3rd?
Sure. So in the heart of downtown Cleveland, Ward 3, precincts I, L, and Q, they historically have voted at Old Stone Church on Public Square. And for this upcoming November, as we were trying to work through poll places, there was some concern there regarding to the pandemic and the church wanting to know, it may not be ideal for them to be a poll place. Luckily, the Cleveland Cavaliers, they reached out, we talked with them, and Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse is going to be a polling location on November 3rd. So we figured, what can be better than Old Stone Church? Well, we'll go to the field house. So, but it's very important that individuals know that the Rocket Mortgage Field House is for a defined set of voters. And it is those voters who live in Cleveland Ward 3, precincts I, L, and Q. And that's the only individuals who can vote there. It's only on election day, so it's not early in-person voting. That's at a different location. That's at my building. And it's not for anybody who just lives in the county. It's for those three. So that's important. It's going to be in the northeast corner of the arena. I think they call it the Cliffs entrance, which is kind of close to the East Garage. And individuals will come in there and they will vote there out in the vestibule area. Still cool. You're coming into the arena to vote. And it'll be all the same, ID and all those types of things for individuals. One little change or one difference with the field house, and this was a condition of voting there, is that voters, when they come, they will have their temperature taken. And if their temperature is below 100.4, they will vote in one area. If it's above that, they will vote in a different area. No one gets turned away. But that will be unique for that location. There'll be parking, should be street parking on Huron. We're working with Cleveland Traffic Control on that. So pretty cool thing. But again, it's just for a certain set of voters.
And we need to thank, I think on that point, Tony, we need to thank LeBron James and members of the NBA who stepped up and made that one of the proposals when they said that we don't want to move forward unless certain things happen. Because I know that, I think in Major League Baseball, I think the Dodgers are going to allow their stadium to be used. Just great that that people are getting involved. I hope this is not just a one-time hit. I'm hoping that these individuals, corporate Cleveland and corporate America, understands that voting is very, very important. That's one of the things that we're doing when we talk about the poll workers. We're literally saying to corporate Cleveland, we're going to be on, the secretary is going to be on a conversation with the Greater Cleveland Partnership later on this month. And we're trying to persuade corporate Cleveland and corporate Ohio to allow their employees to be off that day and let them be poll workers. It's a fantastic opportunity, but I just want to reemphasize it. If we do not, we got 4,000 polling locations throughout the state of Ohio. If we don't get the 35,000 poll workers that we need, we're going to have to close down polling locations, or we're going to have long lines, and we don't want either of that to happen. So, like I say, I want to thank the Cavs and all the other individuals around the country that are opening up their arenas and their facilities to allow us to be able to allow us to have an election in a safe, secure environment, so that everybody knows that when they go vote, it's going to be safe, it's going to be fair, and it's going to be secure.
Well, Zach, thanks for mentioning the Cavs and the sports teams stepping up, and I'd like to give a shout out to all three of our professional sports teams in downtown Cleveland: the Browns, the Cavs, and the Indians. I think we were the first city in the country to have all three sports teams kind of band together and embrace voter registration, voter turnout, and getting engaged in voting this fall. And I think that's going to be a nice model for other cities to see their sports teams come together in the same fashion. So we're very, very grateful for that. We are running, we're coming up on the hour, and we've covered a lot of ground on voting. Before we pivot to talking about the importance of the census and some of the good work that you're doing along those lines, are there closing thoughts that you'd like to share with regard to voting? And Devontae, I'll start with you and then turn to Zach and Tony.
Absolutely. So as we've continued to mention, check out all of the resources that DCA has been sharing on their platforms. Flatten the curve by double checking your voter registration. Complete your vote by mail application. Get that in ASAP, like tomorrow, today, immediately after this webinar. And then secondly, what I also want to emphasize is the ballot education, voter education. Since after you deliver or after you mail off your vote by mail application, take some time to actually learn about who's on your ballot, learn about the issues that will be on your ballot. This is a two-pronged process, or a three-pronged process for that matter. So check out resources such as vote411.org. Even check out your sample ballot when it's available on the Board of Elections website. That way, when you get your ballot, you know who the candidates are, what they stand for, and that way you're truly, exercising your civic duty around the vote. Apologies.
And Zach, same question to you. Any closing thoughts on voting?
I think there's a campaign going around, and I like the way they're saying it. I might butcher it a little bit. It's either called "What's Your Plan to Vote" or "Plan to Vote." One of the way. I think in light of this pandemic, the virus is going around. I think that's a great slogan. You need to plan your vote. What are you going to do? You're going to get the application in the mail if you're a registered voter. So now what do you want to do? Do you want to vote by mail? Do you want to come to Tony's place to vote? Do you want to vote in person? But let's not do it on a whim. Figure out what's your plan to vote this time? And I think that's a great slogan. I think it's a great campaign. And I think individuals right now on September the 3rd should be thinking about how are they going to vote this time in light of what we're going through in this nation.
And over to you, Tony.
I just want people to know that at the Board of Elections, no matter what option you choose to vote, by mail, in person at the polls on November 3rd, or early in person at our location, we are doing what we can to keep all those methods as safe as possible for the workers, whether they're poll workers or our staff processing things, but also for the voters. So if you go to vote in person at the polls on election day, or early in person, or if you're a poll worker, we have been stockpiling various forms of PPE that we'll be sending out for our poll workers to wear to keep themselves safe, some for voters to use, trying to keep all the environments as sanitary as possible. So we're doing the best that we can to make sure that we provide that type of environment for voters, but voters have a responsibility too. So wear a mask. That's a common courtesy coming in, and do simple things. Wash your hands, use hand sanitizer, because we'll try hard to do the best we can, but we need buy-in too from the voters to do their part, and then everyone will have a good and safe voting experience. But probably the most important thing is participate. Every election, presidential elections are super important, but so is every other election. And people need to get in the habit of participating every time they can. And that's what we want to see, exercise this awesome right that we have.
I think it's a great place to leave the conversation about voting. We do have a few minutes left, and I want to talk a little bit about the census, because very important. Another big deadline coming up. Devontae, I guess begin with you. And if you'd share a little bit about the importance of the census and some of the things that Cleveland Votes is doing to try to ensure that we get a a complete, accurate count of the residents of Cleveland.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, Michael, there's a very, very clear synergy between voting, and the census. Currently, the city of Cleveland, we sit at about 49% in terms of a response rate, meaning that about 49%, roughly half of our city has completed the census. Essentially, the census determines funding that we get from the federal government. It also determines how many congressional seats that we get. We're slated to lose about 1 to 2, so House of Representatives. So we're talking about literal representation on behalf of our voters on a statewide federal landscape. And then of course, in terms of the dollars, you're talking about dollars that will determine the infrastructure of our cities and of our communities. If we get a low census response rate for the city of Cleveland, that will thus affect the amount of money we get to the city from the federal government, which will ultimately affect how our neighborhoods look. And some of these factors includes education, healthcare, accessibility, streets and roads, or the quality of our streets, economic development, whether or not there's going to be a Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts somewhere, or a liquor store, or a Dave's. Census data is utilized for everything, for all of this. So just making sure that we are encouraging everyone to complete their census. But pertaining to your later question regarding what we as Cleveland Votes have been doing, we've partnered with, the Cleveland Foundation, as well as our statewide coalition, the Ohio Census Advocacy Coalition, to provide many grants to nonprofits throughout the city to support them in their efforts. A lot of them are doing drive-throughs, as I mentioned before, social media campaigns. A lot of them are even doing hotspot distribution. So like setting up shop at a parking lot with some hotspots and allowing people to come and complete their census. While still adhering to the social distancing guidelines, as well as a number of relational organizing efforts, such as text to text or friend to friend texting campaigns.
Let me say something on this, Mike.
Please.
I'm telling you right now, Cleveland is in trouble, and we need to start to set the alarm that Cleveland is in deep trouble. Cleveland is only at 49% of response rate with the census right now. Means less than half of the people who received their census information in the mail either returned it, or when someone knocked on their door, they didn't answer the door. So there are 3 ways to get this done. 1, if you still got your census information that was sent to you, not once but twice, fill it out. 2, you can call, you can do it by phone, or you can do it online. And the fourth one is someone's going to be knocking on your door. Anybody who has not returned it, they're going to be knocking on your door, and they're safe across the board, the same way Tony was talking about how safe they're going to be when you go vote. But let me tell you something, and I'm going to make it in stark terms. If we right now go at 49%, of which the city of Cleveland is last, of all the cities that are 300,000 or more, city of Cleveland is 68. We are last in the entire country as it relates to response. If we stay at that number at 49%, and you figure that everyone that is not counted costs the city of Cleveland roughly about $1,800, do the math. That means in a 10-year period of time, the city of Cleveland will lose $2.8 billion. Imagine that. $2.8 billion that was supposed to come to the city of Cleveland will not come to the city of Cleveland simply because people did not fill out their census, which means we lose teachers. We're always talking about the importance of teachers and schooling and education and how important that is. We're going to lose them. We're going to lose those teachers. We're going to lose the ability for great education. We're going to lose them. And all it takes is free. It's across the board. It's absolutely free. So we can talk about congressional districts, which are important. We can talk about council seats, which are important. Me as a former council person understands that. But I'm looking at the overall revenue that we're going to lose for doctors and nurses and teachers and police officers and roads and bridges and hospitals. $2.8 billion is a lot of money simply because we won't fill out something that's absolutely positively free. And there's no reason in the world for Cleveland to be last out of all the 68 cities in America that are 300,000 or above.
Well, 100% agreement that we need to get not just downtown residents, but all of our residents in the city of Cleveland and really all of Ohio filling out the census. And it is, as Devontae and Zach, you've both articulated, so important for so many reasons. And if you have access to a computer, please get online and fill out the census. I know the Cleveland Public Library downtown is now open. So if you don't have access to a computer, come downtown, fill out the census online. If somebody comes knocking on the door, put on your mask, grab a pen, and please fill out the census, and know that we're doing all we can at DCA to work with our downtown Cleveland residents, with Cleveland Votes, the city and the county, the complete count committees, to make sure that we're getting as complete a count as we possibly can under these circumstances. And the deadline is September 30th.
We had a great meeting this morning over at AdCom with Kevin Griffin and his team.
Yes.
He brought together a number of individuals in the community, and we're trying to figure out, how do we get to the grassroots? Because that's what it's going to take. How do we get to the grassroots? How do we get to those harder individuals to count? Because they're just as important as the people that are in other locations. We got to get there. And I want to thank Kevin Griffin and his team over at AdCon that at least brought us together. We want to continue. I know a week from today, all the media outlets, TV, radio, magazines, news, they're going to have what they're calling Census Thursday, Census Cleveland, where we're going to be emphasizing all day, radio, television, magazines, nothing but the census. We've got to get that number. That the average is 62.1. We're at 49. You can tell how far we're behind.
Well, I knew we had a lot of ground to cover. I think we've covered a lot of ground. Unfortunately, I don't think we have time to turn to the audience. But again, I think we covered all the pertinent questions and hit the importance of the census very, very hard. I want to thank Tony, Zach, Devontae, all three of you for joining us and being so generous with your time today and sharing your expertise. To the audience, thank you for joining us. Please register to vote. Please request your absentee ballot early. Please turn it in early, and please fill out your census form by September 30th. And I want to thank you for joining us today. I also want to say, typically, I would say we have another episode of Downtown Now at 3 o'clock next Thursday. We are not doing the regular webinar next Thursday. In lieu of that, we are doing our annual State of Downtown Cleveland in conjunction with the City Club and sponsored by PNC in a session moderated by Rick Jackson from IdeaStream. We'll have a panel that includes Downtown Cleveland Alliance President and CEO Joe Marinucci, Tammy Dorr, who serves as President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership. She's also the chair of the International Downtown Association Board of Directors, and will also be joined by OJ McDonald, who's the CEO of an organization in London that works with all of the downtown business improvement districts in the city of London. So we'll have a great panel, a great opportunity to talk about all the things that are impacting downtowns in the world right now. COVID-19, cries for social and racial justice, and how downtowns across the country and across the world and here in Cleveland are addressing them. I hope you'll tune in at noon, September 10th, through the Cleveland City Club for our annual State of Downtown. In the meantime, thanks again to our panelists and our audience. Thanks to you, Jonathan, and the staff at Downtown Cleveland Alliance for making today's webinar possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.